Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another Facebook Live. Good evening to everybody in New York. Good morning to everybody in India. Good afternoon, Australia, and of course, good morning, Europe. Hope you all guys are wonderful, great, enlivened, and of course, have applied yourself creatively. Really, really important. Now, welcome to the Art Zone. You are in the Art Zone with me, Diana Persakis, aka Mim. Streaming to the world live from my art corner in my studio. Now today I wanted to give you guys a bit more of a context as to what we're going to be doing. Today is a discussion all about fears, failure and rejection. Now I know a lot of artists don't actually talk about this, a lot of people don't want to talk about this, and I think it's such an important aspect of our journey and how we move forward as a result of the different aspects that we encounter, the challenges, the fears, the failures and rejections. And so I thought I'd put myself on the line. I'm going to share with you some of my doozies, if you'd like, over the last 15 years and hopefully inspire all the artists out there that have got a couple of trepidations about what they're doing. So if you've got questions, of course, please write them in. Happy to answer them once I finish the live feed. As I've always said, I'm the only one and only recording and doing things, so it's a little bit challenging to see all the questions coming up. Now, lay of the land, I really wanted to give you guys a little bit of context. I have written some stuff down. That's only because I really want to make sure that I deliver all the information in a succinct and chronological order and a manner so that there's a little bit of a story flow. So in today's live feed, I am talking a lot, and so there's not a lot of art demos per se, but I really do hope that you guys grab some nuggets as I start to talk. And so what I want you to start to pay attention to and to listen is really the emotional aspects that have made a shift for me during my art journey, because that's where the actual gold nuggets are, and that's what will progress you along your art journey. As I've said it before, I'm a big believer that art develops an incredible strong mindset, and it does that because you put yourself out in the platform of vulnerability. And that's my neighbor cutting the grass, by the way, if you can hear that. Vulnerability, a lot of people see it as a weakness, but in actual fact, vulnerability is an incredible strength. So please see that as something that's unique to you, not necessarily something that's going to be used against you. So a little bit of context around my mindset. I really want to give you guys a little bit more information as to how I think and how I move and what my actions are as a result of that mindset. That's really important because it'll give you a really good foundation as to how I've overcome fears, rejections and failures. Now, first and foremost, I am a doer. I do everything. I jump in both feet into the fire. I don't ever speak from something that I've written, and I never give anybody any direction based on what I've read. I've actually experienced that myself. So having said that, I am a doer. I like to do things, experience, see how they feel, what direction they're going to take me. There's a positive and negative to that, of course, but I'll explain as I go along. I don't need much motivation. That's an incredible thing that I have, and I love that about my character. I'm really a go-getter. Once I make a decision, I make what I refer to an incision and pretty much cut away everything that doesn't actually belong to that mindset. And so I move through that negativity incredibly fast, irrespective of what I think the outcome is. And so I pretty much jump in feet forward into the fire. The word no, not possible for me also doesn't exist, and this is largely because I was brought up in an environment where we had to figure things out, and I was privy to watch the people that took care of me, how they dealt with limitations. In actual fact, we grew up in a lot of limitation, and so I was very fortunate. I consider that as to be one of my great strengths, to be able to see how these incredible women dealt with things that they couldn't, figure out. And for example, I grew up in Eastern Europe, and so we lived and we had to take care. Well, I didn't. My great-grandmother, grandmother, and grandmother took care of the farm, but we didn't have a hardware store. So if you needed something, you had to make it, you had to figure things out. So that's why no or not possible for me just doesn't exist. It's not part of my makeup. If I do see an opportunity, again, like I've just said, I actually do jump in straight away into the fire. Now that's a good and a bad thing. The good thing is for that is that I don't have doubt that stays too long in my mind. I really just jump in, and if it's too hot or uncomfortable, I then have to upskill myself quite quickly to figure out how to move out of that circumstance. So I like that about me. I do have a partner that balances that out for me, but for me personally, I pretty much, I'm like a bull at a gate and just, go forward without doubting myself. Now, on the back of that, of course, the reason why I do that is I trust my capabilities. I trust my abilities. I have an incredible strong foundation that, and a knowing that I'd be able to figure it out, that I'd be able to climb out of that, and I'd be able to work it out. Now, that's a really important skill when it comes to living a creative lifestyle, but even a skill that's really good for every other vocation, every other employment job opportunity that you guys are doing, because having a creative mindset gives you the ability to then work through problems, have a creative, is a word again, solution for how you maneuver through problems. And that's why I keep on saying art is an incredibly strong developer for an incredibly firm and focused mindset. So like I said, for me, I really don't think about too much what the outcome is. I really focus on a gut instinct and a gut feel, and thus I jump in feet first into the fire. Now, the thing also that's really important with that is, because I don't doubt myself, what I do is I also don't box myself into definitions. I do tend to look at the wake of my speedboat and understand what those outcomes have been. What I do is I don't say that they were positive or negative. In the wake that I'm assessing, I simply see it as an experience. The thing with that, of course, is why I do that. The biggest reason is because I don't like to put myself in a box that defines me as either A or B. Because if I look at that box as being positive or negative, then what will tend to happen for my mindset is that then I will start to make and take action that's based on a certain expectation, i.e. I really just want to be positive expectation, or I really don't want to do that because it's going to be negative. So that's why I never define myself in any of my actions that are based on positive or negative outcome. Really, my actions are always based on an inspired action versus expectation. And that's incredibly important. Because if you start to box yourself, what will start to happen is that you will never ever take new directions or experiences or create things that have never been done before. So that's why I don't actually put myself into a positive or negative box. That's really important. Now, I also have a definition around what success is for me. And so success for me is really defined in how I treat myself. That's really important, and other people as a result of that. But more importantly, I define success to be being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And so if I reach my goal, I'm successful. And if I, quote unquote, by external definition, fail that goal, I'm equally as successful. And the reason for that is why I look at things as being success and success, no matter the definition of that outcome, is because the lesson, the newfound knowledge, the newfound strength within me that's not seen by the external world is far more beneficial and delicious than a material financial expectation which is fleeting and can actually be lost. So that's really important. Now, a really good question that I got asked is, why do I take chances and why am I such a big risk taker? That was really cool. I think for me, art and in my life in general, I see it as an explorative process, as an explorer, if you like, of life. And I understand and I'm fully comfortable and aware that from an external perspective, that can be deemed and looked at someone like me as being quite irrational and erratic and not being steadfast in having a planned out life. But in actual fact, it's not the case. It's simply that I do experiment with everything on my journey and then put it in one box as a great experience. And that's really important. But more importantly to that, I take risks because I never ever want to the words to come out of my mouth to say I never took a chance on life. For me personally, I find regret to be the biggest poison, and so I just don't want to live a life of regret. I'd rather live a life filled with experiences, and so that's incredibly important for me. But from an art perspective, when I take risks, the thing with that is that in my risk taking, I discovered palette knife. In my risk taking, I discovered what I like to do, because I mean, I learned through the school of hard knocks how to paint, meaning I experimented with a lot of mediums, and through that I discovered really what I was about, and then was able to bring that into the work that I was creating, and that's incredibly, incredibly important. So there's a little bit of background to my mindset and how I work and how I think, more importantly. That's really important. So what I would ask everybody to consider in this discussion is to think about what you like to think about. What is it that makes you tick? What are your fears, more importantly? And why isn't that you are not taking that step forward? And how can you create the opportunity to move through that fear? That's really, really important. Okay, so let's start with fear number one. This is quite funny. Like I said, bear with me. I have written things down, so I want to give you guys as much information as possible. Now, when I started painting, this was quite funny now, not back then. This is probably about 15 years ago. I made a vow to myself to never, ever, ever paint trees or portraits, which is ridiculous given the stuff that you see behind me, that I now love painting portraits. And it's an interesting thing what I did then. I didn't realize it at that time, but that ideology crept up into all of my art process for 5 to 7 years, and the frustrations kept growing and growing and growing and growing up until I realized what my mind was doing. So in me saying I'm not good at trees, which I hear a lot of students that come to my class talk about and speak out loud, I'm not good at portraits, nope, I can't paint apples, I can't paint pears, and I hate painting still life. There's a reason why people say that. Now, from my perspective, I can't dive into everybody's mindset, but from my perspective, what I was creating was a limitation of my incapability. I pretty much said, I don't know how to do it, I really don't care to learn how to do it, and I'm just not going to deal with it. So I'm never going to paint trees and never going to paint people. And so that mindset plagued me for an incredibly, incredibly long time. What I then realized is that those standards started bleeding into every other aspects of art. And so I was now living life in avoidance of what I wasn't capable of doing. That's really, really important. Creating and living life in avoidance. And so what started to then manifest for me is that I just didn't want to attend classes that was teaching landscapes or detailed around still life, because it meant that I had to focus on trees. I said I'm just going to do shapes and be contemporary, just contemporary, and not really deal with the full gamut, the full foundation of learning art from an impressionist perspective, from 3D, from learning the Flemish style of painting. And so after realizing that I was now creating that energy of living in avoidance, it was only in through a circumstance of having an art class that I really wanted to go to, but they were painting nudes, and people that I thought, stuff it, I'm just going to face my fears and book myself in that class and see where that's going to take me. So what I did, that is, instead of saying that I can't do something, I actually made sure that I put myself feet first, jumped into the fire, and dealt with the emotions that were keeping me away from actually achieving that particular outcome. So that was really, really important. So the whole idea of this, not wanting to paint trees, which, now I know that it to some people is going to sound like, what do you mean? That was a fear? Bloody oath it was. I mean, that was just something that crippled me for an incredibly long time. So if you have those type of fears, if you have those type of irrational thinking, you need to start to analyze why. Why is it? And to put it simply, you just don't want to face rejection. You don't want to put yourself out there so that someone can say, hey, that doesn't look like a tree, that doesn't look like a person, and that doesn't look like a figure drawing. And that's what this whole idea was for me, that I just was creating a life of avoidance versus moving through each challenge to face what I had to pretty much, you know, build myself to, which was this point right now. And so if I was to tell that 15-year-old or that woman, I should say, 15 years ago, you know, what she would need to do sooner is to say, enroll yourself in the still life class, enroll yourself in the nude figure drawing class, and certainly enroll yourself with tutors that painted with a palette knife way earlier than what you did before. So that was that would be my lesson, or my advice I should say, to the 15-year version of me from back then. So that was quite interesting. Now here's another fear that was quite interesting for me, is fear of social media. This is quite, it boggles my mind now thinking about it, because I just did not, looking at that version of me again, probably about, you know, 8 years ago, it just boggled my mind what I created for myself. And so I came across an interview on YouTube, which of course now YouTube is almost my go-to channel, where a really cool speaker started talking about social media. And I never heard of this man before. His name is Brendan Bouchard, if you want to look him up. And pretty much his first statement was, if you are fearful and or hate social media, just know that you don't understand it enough in order for you to love it or like it. And a light bulb went into my mind. I thought, wow, that really is me. I mean, I was totally in fear of it. I was totally hating the whole process. And not to mention, technically, you know, I didn't quite understand the whole, how everything was being linked in and so forth. So that was my first lesson in me thinking, well, if I fear it, what do I really fear? It's not the social media that I'm scared about, but what is it really that's underlying that fear? And that was to do with, again, doing this, putting myself out there and sharing the truth of my journey, of my process, the fears, the failures, the rejections, the fall downs, the frustrations, the creating of really, really, really bad art. And that was what was the underlying process. And so I started then looking at the individuals that were putting out information. I started understanding what they were doing. I even then looked at my favorite celebrities, for lack of a better word, or well-known people that I admired, and how they dealt with sharing an aspect of themselves. And so they became almost a lesson for me, even though they didn't know who the hell I was, which is fine. But I started drawing on what they were doing, and then how I could incorporate that into my personal journey. And this is really, really important, because 2 weeks ago, equally, I had a discussion with somebody around social media, and I started to see how they had a fear around what people would think about them. And so I gently put that out there, as gently as I could have done, and they admitted that yes, there was that trepidation. And so I think that this fear about putting our information out and sharing our personal story is not just limited to people like that are in the public eye. It's actually everybody. And when we start to address why, we'll start to understand how we can also move through those challenges. So that for me was an incredibly important lesson, and something that right now it's nothing really that it's impinging on the visions that I'm creating. And that's really important, because if I didn't deal with that back then I certainly would not be able to move forward and create what I'm creating right now. So really thankful that I had jumped in again, feeding the fire, and learned how to navigate those fiery waters. Now, the other aspect of dealing with facing fear is, this is quite funny actually, now it is again, one of the things that I did again about 7 years ago is again, irrational thought. Being an artist, it just goes with the territory that you want to put your work out in public, and so you want to share that work with the public. But I had this ideology that I would just paint, and somehow somebody was going to find me without me even doing any legwork in the background of it. And I started to see that just wasn't going to happen. I wasn't on social media at that time either, And so I was going a little bit mental as to how I was going to gauge feedback on what my work was all about. Now, I decided to, again, jump feet forward into the fire, and I went and purchased myself one of those big Oz Trail canopies that you see people at the markets have, and they put things underneath their canopy. Well, I bought one of those, and I decided to exhibit in a public park. You heard me right, public park. And I actually got a photo of this moment. I'm yet to share it on social media, but I'm in a park. And if you know anything about a park, think about dogs peeing on trees, children playing ball, people picnicking, talking, walking past you, rowdiness. I mean, there is no way on earth that anybody would have purchased any of my work. But there I was in the middle of a park, waiting to receive feedback on my work. And this was quite a big, facing my fear process, because I was now in the midst of it all, at no filters on what people thought about my work. And so I was there, I think maybe for about 5 months. I did that every single Saturday. I would go into the park. There was probably one or 2 days that I didn't go pending the weather, but every single weekend I was in that park exhibiting my work and showing it and waiting for people's feedback. And this was quite interesting because 2 things happened. Number one, I sold one painting for about 90 Australian dollars. The materials alone cost me about $3.50, which was, ridiculous. But this is the point that I want to make. I started to see how my thinking about what I thought about me and the work that I was producing was really, really low on the scale of worth. And that was my first lesson. And at the same time, the fact that someone purchased my work, kind of gave me the idea of what I was doing and where I was heading, and what people would want on their walls. But also it developed more of who I was. And so facing that fear was quite a unique process, and certainly something that I recommend for people to do. You don't have to go into a park, but definitely gauge the opinion of people, not just from a gallery perspective, but I'm talking about the everyday person, because this is where you will, no joke, start to understand what you and your work is really all about. So that was quite good. The other thing, of course, that I faced as a result of that is the on plein air or painting outdoors. Now, truly putting myself in the public eye and having people mill behind me and gather behind me, and you can hear the whispers of saying, oh, that's not going to work out, oh, that's not going to be good, that's really nothing, because again, they don't understand the process of building a painting, and it's only until they sit there for a very long time that they start to see the finished process and then realize, wow, that's where you started, that's where you're going. But when I faced that fear of painting outdoors, I realized that, how I positioned me, and again, my thinking of what I was doing was really, really important. And ultimately, the definition of what I thought about myself was far more important than what people were saying about me. Because no matter if you're rich, poor, in between, you will always have someone have an opinion about you. And if you don't have a good opinion about you, then you will crumble quite easily when you hear something negative about you, particularly about the work that you're doing and something that means really, really important to you. So I totally recommend that, again, put yourself in a position where you will start to build that self-worth and strength and say, that doesn't really bother me. And a really good example was I actually positioned myself in a park initially. And again, this was a really, really different park, but a busy park with a lot of children. And I remember one kid would walk past behind me, and he actually said to his dad, Dad, look, that's a real artist. And that's a no word of a lie, true story. And I remember in that moment saying to myself, I think I've overcome my fear of putting myself out into the public eye. And it was at that process, at that moment, that time, that I went back home. Again, this was about 7 or 8 years ago, that I said, well, it's time for me to get myself a Facebook account. So thank you, young man. You'll never know that he did that for me, but certainly that was a really, really good lesson to overcome. Now, another thing too that I want to give you guys, fear, frustration, if you'd like, is I always thought about to learn how to be a good artist, I had to have shortcuts, and that's just not the case. I know a lot of people think that you can go to 1 or 2 lessons and then you can only paint intermittently, half time or once a week or once a month. You really have to do brush mileage. You have to put yourself in every single day, whether it's sketching or painting or learning how to mix color, in order to be able to get to a foundational point where you have that strength within you. So that's really, really important. And how I did that, and again, this is again overcoming frustration, because I thought I was going to cut corners, and I certainly thought I was going to get from A to B in a very short period of time. But I started seeing that, what I wanted to achieve for myself, not for the public, is to be able to have a good understanding of how to mix color. And I didn't have that. And so I went and researched various artists, and through universal synchronicity, through an advertisement, again on YouTube, I came across a chap who talked about just mixing color. Ordered his DVDs at that time. There wasn't live streaming, so I got his DVDs from the US, and it was 2 videos, 9 hours each, and I spent 2 days reverse engineering and dissecting everything to do with color. Thereafter, I actually spent 1 year learning how to mix, and this is what I call my year of creating incredibly shit art, because I totally and utterly created just awful art. But what I realized was that in order for me to let go of what was in my mind, or what I wanted to achieve in my mind, I needed to let go of what I thought I had to be. And it was really a year of creating bad paintings, but it was a year of building me. And that's really, really important. Now, the other fear, of course, that I had is no portrait painting. I just didn't want to do anything to do with portraits. And this was also something incredibly weird, that I created limitations around myself. Of course, what I did is, I think I mentioned it, I enrolled myself into a very, very upmarket art school, and I began to understand and learn from other people. So not only was I the worst student in the class, by the way, but I was quite okay to have that vulnerability, and I opened up myself to other people's opinions. And so this was an incredible lesson for me, and incredibly thankful for that process. One of my biggest failures that I would tell anybody right now is this. These were my fears, of course. I can tell you so many more others, but I'm sure you get the ideology of what I did to move through them. My biggest failure was the following. As I started the art journey, and now I was knocking on gallery doors and writing proposals and writing prospects for scholarships, I went and had the privilege of meeting with a curator at a gallery, or somebody recommended that I speak to this particular individual. And so when I had the opportunity to speak with her, the first question that came out of her mouth was, "Who do you paint like?" And me being in a state of mind, a little bit of confusion, and not quite comfortable with who I was, I said I painted like Margaret Olley. Now, Margaret Olley was someone that I admired for a very long time. And I realized the minute that I said that, what had come out of my mouth was a huge lie. Because truly, while I admired Margaret Olley, I actually didn't paint like her. I painted like me, and I wanted to tell her that. I wanted to tell her that I don't paint like anybody else. This is one of me. What you're dealing with is a unique individual, 1 in 7 billion. That's who is standing in front of you. But certainly, I didn't have that confidence to tell her that. And that was my biggest failures that I have ever undergone in terms of art. I tell you honestly, from that moment forward, I never, ever repeated that failure ever again. And that, for me was just incredible step forward to moving into my new direction. So if anybody ever asks you who you paint like you, nobody else. It's really, really important. The other thing too, of course, what was incredibly a big failure for me is now that I was moving, okay, that's my other neighbor cutting the grass, by the way. I'm really sorry if you can hear that, but I'm going to move the microphone a little bit closer to me so that you can get a bit better of sound. Now, another failure, of course, that I had, as I was, moving up into the comfortability of painting portraits and people, I was now beginning to paint well-known people for an art prize in Australia known as the Archibald. And so I was so fortunate and incredibly joyful to be able to get an interview and a sitting with a very well-known journalist. And so when I met with her and did my thing and got some sketches and photographs, when I went back home to my studio, my mind went toward creating a painting that I thought other people would like. And I didn't realize I did that up until I exhibited all the work, or the work went to be judged into the city. And after it, of course, it was rejected and it didn't make it into the exhibition. But what I thought about was how unhappy I was with what I created, because I created something that I wanted other people to like and I didn't like it. Whilst I liked what I created, the image, the energy of that painting wasn't what was in my gut, what was my instinct. And so that was an incredible failure on my behalf, because I focused more on what other people wanted versus what I wanted. So that's a really important thing and an important step that you need to be aware of when you're creating your own artwork. Last but not least, while I've had many rejections, and you wouldn't be too unfamiliar with rejections. There are rejections from galleries, rejections from various different events and so forth. But this was the funnest and most funniest rejection that I wanted to share with you, because it was something that I thought, what just happened? And I laughed. I mean, I remember sitting in the car and I'm thinking, this is quite funny. So it was art related, but the idea that I had was to partner with a radio station, and I really wanted to be able to deliver this ideology, so inspire people through a radio context, and at the same time I would have the freedom to play the music that I listen to in my studio and couple that with descriptions and create an audio style story for a radio context. And so I approached a local community radio, which I knew that they were looking for young mindsets. The current people that they had were, I think, 65 plus, and the youngest person that was there was in their mid-40s. And so I wanted to introduce, and given that I have, the privilege of being and know a 20-year-old mindset and the 60-year-old mindset, I wanted to bridge that gap and be able to create a unique radio station that was inspiring, that was motivational, that was groovy, and be able to stream it live in this manner, so that I would be able to not just get the social media people that are interested in this, but also now inspire the older generation bracket to get a bit more of a creative mindset. So I booked an appointment, we had a meeting, and it was a really interesting thing, because I met with the two individuals that ran that station, no names mentioned, and I knew in the moment through their questioning that they just weren't interested. I knew the minute that they asked, how are you going to do it and why? The response that I received from them was, we actually don't want to bridge the gap. And I was quite saddened to hear that, because I knew, and I still know, the importance of being able to link different generations from the 20s to the 60, 80-year-olds, 40, 50, and be able to merge that and create something unique. And the funny part about that, so I knew I was rejected in the actual meeting. They still asked me to put together a run sheet and how I would see that, program being created. And I did it, full knowing that it wasn't going to go anywhere. But I did it just because I'm that person. I didn't want to let my thinking down in how I define myself and how I work ethically. I didn't send it through, and of course I got rejected. Now here's the kicker. I got rejected from a volunteer position. It was a volunteer position. I wasn't going to get paid. There was no remuneration. I was prepared to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, kick-started at 6 a.m. and work for free for 2 hours. I found that incredibly funny. And what was more hilarious on my behalf is that the people that I was standing in front of did not recognize a person that was willing to do that for free, for absolutely free. So there you go. That was my biggest rejection. I still find that hilarious. I still find that quite comical. But the point that I want to make is that truly, I think you need to stick true to your standards. And the minute you walk into your own personal power, you start to not be bothered by rejections, fears, and failures. And you start to recognize that some people are just not willing to match your energy level. It's not to say that they're themselves, there's something wrong with them. It's nothing like that at all. Rather to say that they just still need to work through their own journey and through building their own mindset in order to be able to work on the same level. And that's all that is. And so, I still love these people. They're lovely people. There's nothing wrong with them. Rather, they just weren't able to see my vision and my mindset, and that's okay. But for me personally, I see it as something to grow from. I see that, rejection, fears, and failures as an opportunity for me to redirect myself. I don't see it as a block, rather a redirectional arrow that's going to take me into new, more exciting journeys and directions. And so, the viewpoint that I do really hold for myself, that if it's a no, it's actually not a no, it's just not right now. And so I never really do focus on what has not happened. I really do always move forward to what I can achieve. And by all means, I never, I'm not this perfect, guru. Certainly I do have my down days. It's just that I have learned how to focus on the positive and not give the negative too much attention. And that's this whole ideology of facing your fears, failures, and rejections. And a really, really good question that I got asked in a beautiful podcast from Michelle, if you're watching, hi. She asked me what was my greatest achievement. And that was something that I quite appreciated, being asked that question, because I've been asked many questions, but that was something that I've never received. And the answer that I gave is the answer that I'm going to give you guys. My biggest achievement is walking into my own personal power. And that's an incredible thing to have. Walking into that, it's not like, you open a door and say, hey, come in, personal power, and put it on. It's as a result of fears. And my personal power is as a result of the rejections and the failures. And, personal power isn't something that's measurable by an external standard, by a social, economic standard. It's not material. I can't actually show it to you. But what I can say with an incredible loving heart and a strong mindset is that it is lasting, it is tangible, and it is transferable. And so when you have that personal power and when you have built that foundation for yourself, it's like now you are able to build your skyscraper of your vision, with sturdiness and quite a, bolted down feeling. And personal power, therefore, allows you to now maneuver the landscape of, well, that's not going to be for me. These people aren't seeing my vision. That's okay. I'm just going to go somewhere else. And you never really then focus on why hasn't it arrived. You really start to become focused on what else can I do. And like I said, I'm not perfect. I certainly have my up and down moments, and I always put in the effort of maintaining and upskilling myself. Otherwise, you become stagnant. So there you go. These are my fears, failures, and rejections through art. And I hope it's given you guys a little bit of an insight into your own thinking. And I'm hopeful that as I've shared with you my process, that you start to kind of question yourself and you start to think about, what is it that I need to do and I need to move through in order to not fear that fear anymore and be at a new foundational point. That's really, really important. That's really it. I think that you guys have the greatness in you. I know you do. I wish that I could be able to bring you into my energy center and be able just to feel what that is for a moment, because the minute you do, you'll start to realize that the power is within you, that you have the courage, that you have the strength, that we are all born, by the way, with confidence, courage, and trust. You don't have to learn these things. These are all innately part of us. It's really you becoming aware of you and saying to yourself, I can do that. And the minute you move and overcome one failure, you will then start to trust your capabilities and you. And so if I was to tell anybody what would be the first step that I would do for myself is to define yourself, give yourself a definition. For example, I am doing the best what I can with what I can and what I know. And so there is really not too much room left in that to berate myself if I fail. And the best example that I can give you is for people that have got children, or you're watching other people with children, you will see that they never, ever, ever berate their child after they've attempted the first of anything. They'll always give them encouragement to continue and, you know, do it again and again and again. Well, that same philosophy should really apply to yourself. Don't berate yourself after your first failure. Start to become aware that it was your first attempt, and so the next time around you do it far, far better. And the same thing with art is that brush mileage and practicing and practicing and practicing and doing on a daily basis is the key. And as I've always said to my art boys in Bundanoon, that you need to bend like a palm tree, don't be stiff as a gum tree, because of course gum trees snap quite easily the minute that a storm comes through. They are not able to weather that storm. And so if you are too stiff in the way that you're experiencing life, you'll find that you just won't be able to move through that with ease and comfortability. So remain pliable, remain flexible, and of course open-minded for new things to find you. That's really, really, really important. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. I hope that I have been able to give you a little bit more understanding as to the art process, because art is really like any other business. It's just a matter of having the confidence to move through and work the issues and building that mindset to a point, a foundational point that nothing's going to topple you over. So thank you guys. I love you. I thank you for connecting with me. I hope you are all well. I encourage you to do one creative thing today or tomorrow, pending where you are in this beautiful earth of ours, and discover your capabilities through facing your fears. Until next time, thank you for tuning into the Art Zone with Mirjana Pasakis, aka Mim. This art corner is certainly flowing with good energy and good vibes. And until next time, guys, I love to come and bring you some more art fun, art knowledge, art inspiration and motivation. And while I remember, before I forget, tune in on Thursday, the 23rd of November at 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Savings Time, because now I'm definitely going to give you guys a bit more of a deeper insight into what I do with a portrait before I begin to paint it on canvas. And this is a demonstration with my fingers, so we're going to get a little bit dirty. So tune in on Thursday, 23rd of November, 1 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Daylight Savings Time. Thank you guys. I appreciate you as always. Be you. You are 1 in 7 billion. Until next time. Bye.